Okay. Hello. Good evening. Good morning. I don't want to say good night. I know it's good night in some regions, but good morning and good evening, and welcome to our LinkedIn Live. As you see, we have a wide range of panels for us uh, from uh, from North America, Canada, India, and Australia. So covering almost the entire globe. I'll let the participants introduce them in a while. The reason that we chose this topic and why we are hosting this live is, this is meant to be a pure exchange between leaders from different industry and different continents, and to understand, how are they shaping their strategies for the future. What we have seen is, remote work is here to stay. So that we will take that as a given. There were talks a couple of months back of whether this will stay, whether a hybrid will come in, will people adopt, how will it affect the economy, etc. There are various contours to it. But what we want to discuss in this, and explore some avenues as what is the opportunities that it is unlocking. It is upending several things that we all understand, but at the same time there are massive opportunities being unlocked, and the idea is to look at the whole change which is being thrust on us from a more positive and exploratory perspective, as to how can we look at various aspects. Where can technology help us? Can employee engagement be improved? Can people become more productive? Are they more productive? Do they like this scenario better, and so on and so forth. So that is something that we'll be discussing. This session will be for about an hour. My name is Sushant. I'm the co-founder. I'll be the host, and I'll let the other participants introduce themselves. We'll have a round of questions and a Q&A for the audience towards the end. In the event you're watching it on LinkedIn, there might be a slight lag, about 10 seconds. So bear with that. There is some tech issue there. Facebook, you will not face that issue. Should you have any questions, feel free to use the chat window and we'll answer them towards the end of the session. Thank you. And I'll let the panelists introduce themselves. We'll start with Gunjan.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sushant, and thank you for including me. I am Gunjan, as Sushant said, from Go Emerald, and I'm located in Toronto, Canada. I've been running my own consulting firm for the last, I would say, 8 years or so. And the focus has always been digital transformation, more recently in the disruptive innovation space. So, as Sushant said, remote work is here to stay. I'm definitely not going to be the unpopular one to dispute that by any means. In my experience, remote collaboration is what that is all about, right? Look at the panelists that are in front of you. It's a global crowd. And that's going to continue, right? Remote work enables that. And when you make people go back to the office and spend time in traffic, that's not going to be a very happy situation because it's going to take time away from that collaboration. I think the challenge is going to be how do you balance both the collaboration and human side of things, right? Because the way the tech has been designed in past is more like a utility, right? And it's only recently that we've realized that it's much more than a utility and an efficiency driver. It needs to also take into account the needs of the human being that are using it. And that's why there's so much more focus now on mental health of your employees, of your customers, how to have those conversations in more engaging and effective way. So one of the things that I'm personally very passionate about is how to balance that responsible innovation side of things. That's the word I use for it. Balancing the human, the user, the individual, the collective with the tech and the ROI from innovation that we're trying to create. So I'm personally here to basically learn from the rest of the panel and also see how they're enabling that. So that was a bit longer than Sushant probably hoped for, but maybe I'll pass the baton to Himanshu next.
Thank you, Gunjan, and thanks, Sushant, for inviting me. And hello, everyone. I'm Himanshu, and I'm a business mentor at MIT Enterprise Forum at Cambridge, and I'm also the director of operations for a space tech firm, which is trying to build the next generation, one of the largest space station on orbit called Think Orbital. And I'm really looking forward to exchanging views with all of you. Thank you.
Uh, Thank you, Shashank, for inviting in, first of all, and being a part of this global platform, being the panelist from the different geographies. So I'm from India basically, and associated and leading the IT head practices for the Furukawa Minda Electric Group in India. And as far as this topic is concerned, it's really touched to the heart of the not to me also, but it's a first and foremost priority for every IT techie guys to to take it into a place just to collaborate more people in a more engaged way basically. So that's about. Thank you, Rod.
Thank you. I'm Rod Hutchings from Kindrel in Australia and New Zealand. I look after digital transformation for our market. Um, global teams, and remote working really has been part of my experience for the last decade. And one of the things that I'd be interested for us to talk into in terms of unlocking value. For me, one of the things I've witnessed and experienced over the last 2 years is probably where is more inclusion in some ways, working with teams that are based remotely. A lot of our probably 80% of the teams that I work with actually are based in different countries, and they have been for much the last decade. So by having one of the really positive things that I've experienced is having the entire team available virtually, and has really made it more inclusive for people who are remote in different countries to actually participate. And that has really unlocked value, is really one of the experiences that I've had. So thank you. I look forward to discussing it more.
Sure. Thanks, Rod. And while you guys were introducing yourself, it just occurred to me that we are, industry and geography. We have diversity. We also have diversity in terms of focus. So there is the last frontier of space that probably Himanshu is representing. There is the cyber world that Rod and Gunjan represent, and there's a hardcore physical terra firma, as we call it, which Brijesh represents. So we are representing all three aspects in that sense. So thanks, and I'll get started with my first question. Is what, from your perspective, in your respective industries, what are some of the values that you feel that the remote work has unlocked? If you want to give some thoughts around that, what are the opportunity areas that it has brought about?
I think maybe I'll just start. I think, like I was mentioning, um, the inclusive value, I think, has been quite significant. So I guess one of the challenges prior to our COVID situation and everyone being at home, um, in my experience, would be where I had a team. I might have had a team of 6% of the team were based in other countries, and I'd have 40% of people, or maybe 30-40% of the people actually in a meeting room, and they're all together, and it was very hard for the participants who were remote to actually really engage and participate and get their thoughts across to the team that were co-located. So that it's really opened up a greater voice and opportunity for those remote teams. That's been really positive. I think it's been positive from the perspective of getting other ideas. It's been positive, probably for the perspective of engagement and empowerment of the remote teams as well. So that's an example. So just to kick it off. So over to someone
Sure.
else. Thank you.
Thanks.
So, in my experience, when I see this whole collaboration being digital post to the pandemic, so first was the context was to put it across the right framework in a place where the people could come in. It has to be easy into use, and it has to be very harmonious in terms of the people's usage perspective. But when we call it as the value which it has unlocked over a period of time, and it's now very easy to the people to use any tag tool and everything and come onto any platform. The ideal side is not a tangible but intangible value. I see it that a lot of flexibility have been improved. People are now very much flexible to operate it from any part of the world, and they are able to operate in whatever they would like to do it. So the flexibility, I see that it's a larger, not the tangible value, but intangible value which is it has unlocked through a remote collaboration works basically.
Perfect.
So I would say that in addition to whatever has been brought out by Brajesh and Rod, the biggest value would be you are getting back those 2 to 3 hours of your life for yourself. So your emotional agility, your availability to yourself, your hobbies, your interests, your family, your friends, it's phenomenal. So it actually changes how you look at your work, how you look at yourself. So last 20 years, 15 years, 10 years, whatever your has been, those interests, hobbies, which you were actually gardening and you always thought that I'll do it next weekend or the next summer vacation. And this is the time. So it's almost the transit time depending upon which part of the world you are. But it always vary from 1.5 both ways, 2, 3 hours sometimes if you are in a big metro. So those 3 hours of your life, every day is coming back to you. 15 to 20% of your awake hours. So that brings so much of happiness and the real work-life balance. So that if that comes back to the employee or the team member, you can imagine the productive tangibles which come along with it to the team. Definitely, it has some onus which has to come with the team management and as a company, as a firm, how do you take it forward? But essentially, it is something which is the greatest value of remote work and the acceptance of the idea of remote work across the globe, across the industries is phenomenal. And for that, we would, and definitely technologies as well as the culture of all companies have taken it in the stride. So this is something which is the greatest value in my opinion, and it is going to stay and it's going to change how we work, how we look at work and our own life individually, as well as holistically as teams, as well as organizations. Thank you.
Yeah, and just in the last couple of minutes, I'll build upon what Himanshu said, right? It's that word balance. Before it used to be all about productivity of tasks, right? When you look at how the businesses define their ROI, it used to be how do we squeeze as much work out of 9 to 5 as we can, and nobody would have put it that way before, right? Like pre-pandemic, I would not have used those words because I would not even think about that because that's the norm. You go to work, you deliver, you come back, and that whole definition has had to be changed. And just really quickly, what Himanshu is pointing out is the value of the human being at home versus at work, but also how that builds up to the value to the business, right? The motivators that you use, the formula that used to be all about revenue and how to give people productivity tools that can make them a lot more efficient. That's the word that used to be there, right? I don't hear people using the word efficient as much anymore during pandemic as they used to in past. And I think the reason for that is there's a need for managers to be a lot more human now, right? The role of managers has changed. And how many articles have we read about how to be more human, how to be more compassionate? Because it's very difficult, right? If you have a team of 10, 15, 20 people, how do you figure out what each one of them needs? So there's a little bit of issue, right, that's come in. But I think that's if the managers take their time with that 10, 15% extra time, like Himanshu said, they're getting back. If they give that back to learning more about their employees one-on-one as humans, then you can really combine the ROI for your business with the ROI for the human being, right? So that's kind of what it's about for me. And some of these ROIs you can measure, and quite frankly, some of these are just qualitative things that'll be visible to your culture if you're doing well, and they'll be visible to you if you're not doing well.
Sure. Thanks. And I would like to pose a question to you, Brijesh, because when 2020 came in and this remote work was thrust, while the IT side of things, as we call it, or the technology, the businesses which are more reliant or more used to technology made a very fast adoption. There was this saying that there is a big word outside of technology. So there is manufacturing, there's real estate, and labor intensive industries which will not be able to make this adoption. And it reminds me that we were hosting a webinar later last year, for some of the manufacturing giants, and they said the biggest acceleration has been the adoption of 4.0. which was earlier a theoretical concept, that we will look at it at one point in time, and now that the need is felt, and especially with call it things like the great resignation or the migration issue that India faced, there was a realization that over reliance on cheap labor is not here to stay, and it will not be a differentiator. So what has been your experience since you're closer to the ground in that aspect?
When fundamental things I see it, it was common across the geography. Actually, it is not specific to the any part of the region or any part of the world. So it was a very common phenomena the world has seen it actually. But the practicality of the fundamental remains lying that how flexible things are basically in terms to facilitate the either technology or the ways means to the people. So that remains always in a challenge, and how much you are frugal in terms to implement it. So that is the key of a success. So what we see is we have done a lot of innovative things in terms to start up the collaboration we were having. So it is not the one channel the way we have started interacting. So we were having a three four dimensions of the communication channels what we established. One side is the employee, which is the core of your business. Those has to be communicated across. On the second side, we have collaborated with vendor with the different mediums, vias, and we've kept them collaborating. And third was the customer side of the story. All these three, the arms of an organization needs to be moved across. So uh, I see personally as myself the pandemic, whomsoever have returned to the back and sustained into the business. The reason, the hardcore reason behind that was the who was the much more collaborative in their approach. Either it is a vendor, either it's your own employees, either it's your customers, how you're interacting with them, how frequently interacting them, how
Okay, I believe there is a network issue there. So while he comes back, what I also want to explore is
and
yeah,
um,
sorry, go ahead.
and we've been very successful into
Hmm. Oop,
Oh,
lost him.
lost him.
We're having
collaborating.
technical challenges.
So we've been into very very much successful into collaborating our all the stakeholders all from the all dimensions. We were had specified programs when we will call them, what is the agenda for them to collaborate, and we always try to impart the learnings and the knowledge, because vendors don't have too much of an exposure to the market and the access to the knowledge resource and everything. So in that sense, we have enabled the overall ecosystem in 360 dimension.
Perfect. This is interesting. The question that I would like to pose to the group is, while this thing, the remote work happened almost all over at one go, different countries had different level of preparedness as far as enabling remote work is concerned. So a developing country like India has a very different infrastructure provision, or for that matter, something as simple as the homes are not geared up for a private office scenario. Uh, so, what were the some of the transition challenges that a developed economy, maybe it North America or be it Australia, did you experience any of those transition challenges of a work from home, wherein homes and the other infra was geared up for a remote work scenario?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, the pushing up the things, like, it's not been a challenge for specific geography. I would see, it would be in for everyone. There is a shift in terms in how to facilitate the overall things at the doorstep, basically. Being at a lockdown, there are a lot of restriction with the movements and everything. So we have facilitated the technology network platforms, and the asset devices, whatever it is required at the doorsteps basically. So in that way we have collaborated our internal employees, so to the strength and the capacity whichever it is required for them to perform it better, and to up to the capacity. We have facilitated the infrastructure and assets at their doorstep. So that was a really challenging, it's a small words, while listening, it seems to very small word, but it's a, a different work which needs to be done. And that's how we have managed across.
Sure. Thanks, Brijesh. Rod, Gunjan, Imanshu, what are your thoughts? Did you see some transition challenges of?
The transition challenges would have been just change. So in terms of the core infrastructure that's available in Australia, generally it's quite okay. Most of our teams, because I work in a technology industry, we'd been working remotely and able to work at home years before the pandemic happened. So we were probably well prepared for that. Probably some of the challenges, though, just would be what was different would be that, and it's not the case right now, but I live in Melbourne, Australia. I mentioned before, Melbourne, Australia was probably one of the most locked down cities during the core of the pandemic in the world. And, one of the challenges just was getting accustomed to having a shared space where we had, like myself, I had 3 kids at home learning, doing their homeschooling at the same time I'm trying to work. So just incorporating the whole family and incorporating the family, into your work life, and then being again inclusive and welcoming. And that's, I mean, some people may have had young children, babies. How do we just get accustomed to being flexible? Was very key, and I think one of the things that helped us mitigate that was probably increased the speed that we rolled out tools that were more collaborative than we'd ever used before, leveraging tools like Mural, leveraging Slack, just new ways of collaborating that we could do virtually. Really helped strengthening our way of working together and being effective.
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah, so I'll build upon that from my Canadian experience. I live in Toronto, Canada, as I said earlier, and a lot of the business that happens on this side of the world is the financial services, right? The big banks, the retailers, and it's really dependent on the culture of the organization, how they behaved, and how risky it was, I would say, to their business when they first went into this situation, and the nature of the business itself, right? So for retailers, obviously, it was more about balancing their corporate environment, but also balancing these rules and regulations that were changing in their industry, right? So for a while, we saw this push towards everybody go to the store and start populating shelves in a manner of shifts, right? But then at the same time, then it became, well, these people have no training to be in the store. So what are we doing? This is actually less effective. So there was a lot of changing of these rules and how to balance regulations and some of these things that were sort of popping up, right? People thought this would be productive. Let's just go and do this. No, let's put some more thought into it, reverse that decision. So there was a bit of that period that left maybe employees and people thinking, how is my organization making these decisions? Are we actually really good at our business continuity plans and what's truly going on here? And again, that goes back to the maturity level of the organization, not just in terms of IT, but in terms of leadership and business mindset as well. Because a lot of people just had not seen that kind of situation before, right? Unprecedented is the word that gets thrown around, maybe not this year, but last year, the year before that. But it was very interesting to see some of that unfold. On the other side, it was quite interesting to see even organizations that were, I won't call them agile, I'll call them vagile, right? Like a mix of waterfall and agile. And you'd be surprised to know how many people had laptops at work that they just wouldn't bring home. And I thought that was quite strange for me personally because maybe I'm OCD about my laptop. I would always bring it home because what if there's a snowstorm tomorrow or anything could happen? But many people were not used to doing that, right? Because they had a separate work and a separate life. No, I didn't explain that right. They had a separate work life and a separate home life.
Yes.
Work and life don't shouldn't be separate. So that was quite interesting for me, where people felt that their home life was being invaded. Just the fact that the laptop was there, and I think I can't remember who said it, but maybe it was you, Shasant, who asked, even home offices, what does that mean? In Canada, where I live, people who live closer to Toronto, let's say, or metropolitan cities, they have this thing about living in condos, and it used to be quite prestigious, right? I live in a
Mm.
penthouse, but it's like 800 square feet, right? I have the view, and that's what I'm banking on. And the quality of life changed instantly. So I myself live in a condo, but I have the luxury of not having kids, right? So I can make my office wherever I want. And in even people who are in homes that are multi-storied, that's a real challenge, especially for women who have younger kids. And how do I balance that now? Because daycares are closed and some of that support system that you took for granted is just not available. And just supply chain overall, right? Even if you're ordering an extra laptop for one of your employees, when is it actually going to arrive? So what happens to that employee? Even questions like, should I just put this employee on leave and not pay them? And I was surprised people were asking those questions. No, you need to continue to pay them. They're your employee. If you're going to continue to employ this person, you need to pay them and provide them infrastructure, as Brajesh was saying, right? Give them the support and facilities that they need. But you also needed to do that very safely. So if you ask yourself as a human, how many times did you swab a package before opening it, right? In early days, like how many times did you wipe groceries when you brought them home? How many times did you just leave it in the trunk of your car and say, I'll see what happens to this in a week or so? Even though it wasn't really, there was no data to show that that would be helpful, right? So people were actually doing a lot of those quarantine things, even with their tech. And when you do that, what are the delays that come into play? So overall, the impact that if I look at my business, a lot of digital transformation projects either slowed down to a halt or they just got canceled, quite frankly, because a lot of the retailers said, no, the focus needs to be on operations side of things, right? And banks did the same thing. How am I going to provide a service that used to be in a branch before, and I'm not prepared to open business bank accounts online, for example? So my personal example, doing banking with a shout out to HSBC, they did such a great job. You have to balance tech processes and people. And what they opted for is, okay, well, I have no way of opening a new bank account for a business person who's coming to me and doesn't have an account with me
Mm.
before, right? Regulations are in place. I need to validate this person, la la la. But they did that manually in the beginning, right? While also balancing the safety of their employees, right? So it was such a great compromise, I would call it, between all the different parties. And someone said the word collaboration earlier, true collaboration among their staff, among their leadership to figure out what's that middle ground, and even among their customers, right? We sometimes think it's all about the customer and all about their experience, but they're not separate from your ecosystem. So you can collaborate with your customer. And that's kind of, I think, what pandemic showed us. So I'll stop there.
Perfect.
Yeah, I
Great.
agree. Just to add,
Hmm.
I think the whole pandemic situation taught us technology was available, though it got little innovative. But the mindset to accept the idea that people can work remotely
Mhm.
was accepted and implemented as part of the culture during these last 2 years. That has been, I think, the biggest takeaway how the way of working has shifted. Earlier, even if you had the option, you would still insist that you would like to see the team members
Mm.
physically because you always believe that if he or she is not around, that there is lack of effectiveness and efficiency in the organization. Whereas when we had to because of the lockdown, we did and we accomplished a lot. A lot of objectives were accomplished, and like we said earlier, and it has been, and that was towards positive. A lot of positives have come out of it, and I think that is what should be carried forward. If organizations can continue to work remotely or could have a hybrid mode, then perhaps that's the best way to continue with this because that will strike the right balance between the work efficiency as well as the personal accomplishments of each individual. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Imanshu.
Probably
And
one thing I mean,
sorry,
I'll
go
add,
ahead. Yeah.
sorry, from our
Hmm.
experience at Kindrel is that, for example, here in Australia, me in Melbourne, our our offices could be open, like we're certainly able to work, we're able to go out fully, but at the moment, we've really still chosen to have all our teams remotely. So, we aren't back in the offices. We've got 1,000 employees in Australia, and we're still working remotely. So, and because we're doing it effectively, efficiently, it's working. So there's still cases happening in Australia. So it's really, about prioritising the health and safety of our teams and their families. Unfortunately, my son himself has COVID right now, which we're all isolating away from him. But we've got to a place where it is accepted that we can deliver, and we can work remotely. So that's a really good a good outcome to get to, I think, to see that you can deliver, you can add value remotely.
Sure,
There's no
thanks. And
immediate
yeah,
imperative to be back in the office.
true. And that's a great point. So, one of the things which came out very clearly, with which Gunjan highlighted, and all the others kind of echoed, is the focus which has changed both from a managerial perspective as to what a manager is expected to enable. I remember, my start of my corporate life was with GE, and this was the Jack Welch era, wherein there used to be this famous saying that there is no work-life balance. It's a work-life choice that you make. So you either work or you have a life. Decide. You don't get both. And from that to now, in just about 2 decades, and as Gunjan mentioned very rightly, the I've been part of Wipro and some of the technology firms as an employee and as a consultant. The entire focus was, can I do it better, faster, cheaper, right? So the focus was completely on productivity, etc. And suddenly, in about a year, we see the transition being made into collaboration, reduce burnout, make sure that people are more catered to, etc. I remember a couple of, maybe a month or so back, the Microsoft or the Outlook AI system, which throws up and it tells you how much time are you actually spending on the screen, etc. And that's pretty helpful for somebody like me, that I need to get off the digital world and get some time to myself, etc. So so the question that I wanted to ask is, what are some of the changes other than technology becoming more human, if I can call it that, or the outlook being that make it more human first. uh, Other than that, what are some of the aspects that you think technology is helping shape up or cater to in terms of evolving changes?
Maybe I'll start. I think that one of the
Sure.
changes is that we just don't expect people to be at work 9 to 5 or whatever the hours might be. Is that the workday can shift. You can, allow there might be this period where you're focusing on your family or something else. You're going to achieve your outcome in the day, but there's more acceptance that we can be flexible and we can still be effective, more effective, by enabling that, and that really then enables more employee engagement and outcome, to work in that manner. And that's where I mentioned before, like with using tools that we use, like Slack, like Mural, you can participate in a meeting virtually that you might have actually missed the actual time slot for the meeting, but by us using Mural as our electronic whiteboard, you can come back and you can look at the ideas that were there and you can add to it and you can participate um, in the meeting at a different time. And so that's really valuable to still get that holistic input from the team, which can come in other ways. That's really been unlocked via really, this real focus of having everybody being remote. And that's sort of back again to, I guess, use the word inclusiveness, because I think that's really been the gold that's really come from it, is that it's inclusive of getting ideas, getting input, allowing all different styles of ways that people work.
Mhm.
Uh, So yeah.
Actually, if you don't mind, I would love to ask Rod a question which is inspired by one of the audience questions, quite frankly.
Okay.
So somebody mentioned that there's a bit of lack of equity or whatever term you want to use, right? Maybe equity isn't the right word. But when you think about inclusion, you think about the level of experience an employee has. Somebody wrote in the comments that maybe entry-level employees or younger people who don't have that much work experience or even employees that are new to certain teams that don't have that amalgamation with that existing team may be a little bit worse off, right? Because they haven't had that face time, or maybe it's a confidence thing or a imposter syndrome type of thing. So how do you find that balance in that inclusion with a team that has worked together for a very long time and now doing it remotely versus a team that's got new members into it or entry level employees into it?
And
What are
like
your
that's a
thoughts on
good
that?
question because and it's definitely a real question in that like for me
Yeah.
myself during the pandemic, I think now maybe 30% of my team I haven't met face to face. Like I've literally needed to hire new people
Hmm.
that I haven't had the opportunity to have a coffee with, like you might have been drinking just then. Um, and then, but again, it's so you, I guess one of the things um, that originally we really were missing was that coffee chat. You know that you, one things that I really noticed and paid attention to in probably the first year of the pandemic was that is that like for me personally, I would go into the meeting and I would just start the topic of the meeting. There'd be no sort of chit chat, um, so it's harder to get to know each other and things like that. So I mean, one of the techniques or tactics has been, well, no, when we start the meeting, let's just start talking about how are we, like, what's going on. Like, let's just talk about general things because it's just so. Normally, that's what you probably did when you were waiting outside the meeting room, and you could talk about other little things. Well, let's actually just do it virtually. It can't be just switch on this hour. We're just talking about whatever the topic is for the work outcome. Let's be human and engaged with one another.
Sure.
Yeah. Like it's one of those things, right? We're all addicted to collab tools now. But one of the things that I've started to do, and you're going to laugh, is I've never used more emojis than I have in
Yeah.
the last 2 years. And the reason for that is just to take some of that seriousness, like you said, right? You jump right into the topics and the heat of things, and you really do need to balance and give people an opportunity, especially in the chats, because how much time can you spend in a meeting, right? As
Mm.
Sushant said earlier, like screen time, everything is a meeting. You can't face to face talk about every little thing. So if you're in Slack, LinkedIn, whatever it is that you're doing, how do you make people um, feel like they can approach you with some of those difficult conversations, even if they can't find you for a meeting? So that's
Sure.
been one of the balancing acts for me.
I would like to,
Yeah,
then shift. Sorry,
Yeah.
I just wanted
Manju,
to
yeah, go
add.
ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add. Perhaps because most of the onboarding has taken place remotely, a lot of companies have devoted some time that you onboard the new member on one-to-one calls, make him or her comfortable, and that actually is perhaps the future culture of the company. That how comfortable you make the member who's joining you. And again, like I have seen this happening. Perhaps out of 60 minutes of meeting, either initial 5 minutes, like Rod said, or last 5 minutes could be devoted to something which is just one-to-one connection where you are just playing a game or something. We're just asking some very one-to-one social question to people, more than the small talk of how the weather is, because weather generally is not so great. And so that people feel valued and they feel okay, that connection is there. Because earlier, the advantage of physical work one-to-one space was that you had that connection and you could have a water cooler chat, you could have a coffee chat, you could go out for lunches, dinner, and all, which didn't happen. So that emotional connect is very important. Though the whole remote work allowed you to have that personal time and connect with family and your own hobbies. But because finally now also, and 50, 100 years from now also, we will all remain human. So behind all the machines will be human beings. So it's important to have that connect, and 5 minutes of the time of the meeting is good enough to be devoted to this, so that you have that bonding amongst the team members. Thanks.
Perfect, great. I would like to shift the focus slightly. So we've talked about employee engagement, etc. What we've also seen very interestingly is because everything went remote and people were more online. I've seen business models and customer engagements transform almost overnight. Uh, so if I take example of India, then we had initially the online delivery was limited to food, then moved on to grocery and retail, etc. And while during lockdown, when everybody moved to that because the customer was online, now we see a transformation from delivery to a 10-minute delivery, and that's the new buzz in India, with companies making the transition that grocery delivery will happen in 10 minutes flat. And I'm pretty happy because as luck would have it, I'm a couch potato. So the least movement that I have to do, and if I can move my thumbs, I'm the happiest person. My wife hates me for that, but then so be it. So, what are some of the, because all of you are leaders in different industries. So, have you seen the focus change drastically in terms of customer engagement slash business models with this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brajesh.
Yeah. So I could share my example. So, with respect to the industries, so the engagement experience have been changed, not into the, the food FMCG grocery sector, but also the way we experience the automotive, the vehicles and
Hmm.
other things. Those experience are also brought on to, as a digital medium. So there is no way of going on to the, your showrooms, feel, experience, know about the product. It has been made available to the customers at their, hand basically, and in more intuitive manner basically. So I would say no. It's again, the type of business, type of industry, the way customer reach out to the product and product is being shown to the customer. Both the things have been, resolved in different format basically. But it depends upon industry to industry. With respect to the pharmaceutical, it's a different way of, interacting with the customer. If it is automotive, it's a different, and if it is FMCG and grocery, that's a different way of, operating in. So I saw a drastic change into a customer experiencing the product or a services. Both has shaped it up a different level of the engagement ways basically, and it has, by which, a lot of time saving, a lot of movements, other things like that Sushant was saying, so a lot of time saving has been done now. And the organization are now prepared in a way that, they can handle the, what Kunjan said, unprecedented time, right? So being it a new incidence for all, it's a first incidence and the new incidence. But I think industry would have took a, advantage of it, and they have created a different sort of perspective for the customers, and which customers are also liking in, because that's new at all.
Yeah,
Interesting.
it's funny what Brajesh said, right? I think some of them have figured it out, and ones that haven't, are half of them are not around anymore
Yes,
because it's
yes.
been an extended pandemic. But the way that I like to describe exactly what Brajesh said is the power dynamic shift, right? From process to personal experience. How many times have you called up
Hmm.
a company or a customer service department as a customer of theirs, and you've heard the things like, well, that's our process. You want to do a return, you have to do it in the store. You're stuck with
Hmm.
that product. I don't care how much you paid for it, right? It used to be that kind of experience, and you really can't keep a customer for a very long time during pandemic if you have that attitude as a business. And that's where I find some of the conversations are shifting in the market, right? So yes, digital transformation, but also innovation. Because digital transformation, the difference between the two, if I may really quickly, is digital transformation, you're assuming business model remains static and you're providing efficiencies and technologies and operations are changing. However, in the innovation, everything's up for grabs, right? So your business model needs to change to match what the needs of the customers are today and what they're going to be in the future. It's up to you to work that out with your customer in that collaborative model. And that's where I know on Poster we promised that we'll use this word meta and AR, VR. So here I'm using it now. It's if you think about education, right? No industry has been disrupted more than education and supply chains. Those are the two, right? At least for me, I'm biased. I like those industries. And in both those industries, people are the ones that are calling the shots, right? So it's people saying, no, I do not want to do 4 year degrees anymore. What is the value of this degree when AI and data conversations change every day? I do not want to pay universities X amount of money. Why should I do that? For a remote experience, and what's the value of that remote experience on Zoom, right? So the universities and colleges and educational institutions have had to redefine what that means, right? So I don't know if you guys have seen the H&M. I don't know if it's a concept or a real store. To be very frank, I haven't had a chance to experience that myself, but I saw about it on LinkedIn and read a little bit about it. So they have a Meta store, right? They have a Metaverse store now. And people don't know this. There was a video back in the day in 2017 from IKEA in Switzerland where this problem of, I don't know if this couch will fit in my condo or in my apartment, they had an AR tool for that. And how many people know that it existed? Right. So, supply chain problems aside, if you could match your supply chain to some of these experiences, you could solve a lot of different problems. And to your point, Sushant, it takes a very daring leader to do that because
Mhm.
there's a lot of talk of digital transformation. But if you're not challenging your underlying assumptions at the board level and at the seed level, then you're not going to be successful. You're going to spend 25, 30, 50, 75 million dollars bringing in cloud and some of these technologies that are supposed to help you. But it's not up to the tech builders and up to the tech vendors and providers to change your business model, right? You have to take that with reins in your own hands as leaders, and work with your customers more collaboratively. Nobody's going to come and tell you what that is. You need to reach out to them and meet them where they are, right?
Sure, and that's very interesting because just a few weeks back, I was in conversation with the store manager of Decathlon, and which is a complete physical store format till just about yesterday, right? And
Oh,
the
well.
shift they are making to digital is phenomenal, and I like the way that the store associates were trained into telling the customer that why, even though you are in the store, why don't you make the purchase through an app, pay through the app, and we'll give you better discounts, which is a nudge to graduate to digital transactions, even if you're buying something from a store as physical as Decathlon. So I agree to that, which brings me to the point, and we'll probably keep this the last point because there are a lot of questions, so seems to be a very engaging discussion.
Can I just share
So
one thing
yeah, go
before
ahead,
you
go ahead.
get there? Yeah, as one thing that that I participated in last year, at the end of last year, was the World Open Innovation Conference, that was amazing. That for the conference, we used this Meta platform, because we're just talking about this Meta, so it just made me think about it. And what was really amazing with this is that we're at a conference, and it was like being at the physical university where literally everyone was an avatar, which seemed a bit unusual at first. But as an avatar, you could walk between rooms and you would see somebody's
Ah,
name, and if you walked up to them, you could say, "Let's have a conversation," and then automatically, just you two are actually having a virtual meeting like we are now. So
Yeah.
you
And
go
then you
into
find out
different
they're not
sections.
really like a He-Man or a out. No, I'm just,
No, it's like you just. So it was really, and you go, let's go into this meeting room. You can actually have a meeting together. So they're all on this
yeah.
one platform, but it really opened up, having access to world experts that you could have conversations, offline chats with, whilst you also had sessions. And so it was very engaging. And again, I wouldn't have been able to go to that conference, but for the fact that it was using that approach and method. So it was really powerful, I think. So But back to you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Himanshu, quickly to you. I've been
Yeah, I
meaning
just
to
want
ask
to.
this question for some time. No, my question is to you actually.
Yeah,
Is
sure, sure.
given the industry that you represent, so the other parts, be it technology, be it automotive, be it supply chain, retail, etc., is something that most of us can comprehend, relate to because we've seen it. Space is other than the movies and Hollywood, it still remains a very cerebral thing for most of us. So what has been your experience of making this transition in the digital thing?
So first, I'll tell about the
Yeah.
culture. Like for example, our team at Think Orbital, it's a global team. So and it's all connected remotely, and we have a saying amongst us that the sun never sets in our team because we have people in Australia and we have people in North America, and then definitely a lot of them spread all over in Europe. And it happens like this. The collaboration has been fantastic, and that's how most of the future tech companies are working right now. They are all collaborating very well with the whole idea of connected remotely, and collaboration has been fantastic. So it's one technology which has been available in terms of collaboration. Two, the shift in mindset of team members as well as the leaders that this is a given that we will be able to collaborate and have the same efficiency. Because what is efficiency? Efficiency is what output you get out of the input, and you are fantastically efficient because you are performing as good as what you would have done if you were physically in the same office. So it is a precursor how things are going to be. And just to add to the previous point, I had two projects incubated at MIT, which were to do with AR and VR. But last 1 year, and there is one which was a project which would allow you to make an avatar, and you would be able to try various dresses. So it was actually meant for women because women apparel they have a lot of options in terms of the size and the color and the design. So and now this particular project has been taken up and it has been like it has been embarked upon by a haute couture house in Europe, and it's doing quite fine because people have realized the way to provide a customer experience is through the medium of technology, and that's the way to kind of connect to them. So the reverse logistic also becomes easy, and the the kind of connect that you have with the customer is fantastic, and then it's like customer delight at the fingertips of customers. At the same time, you are shedding away the cumbersome supply chain and the requirement of warehousing and the reverse logistics. So it's fantastic, and it is what going to change the way we do business, and it will going to kind of
Mhm.
increase, I think, revenue for the organizations and delight for the customers. Thank you.
Yeah, one last thing, if I may add to that, Shashank, just what Himanshu said. Again, leaders have to be so influential to make that happen because think about what you just shared, Himanshu, is a change in the supply chain means a change in that entire ecosystem and a shift in power dynamics. So there are some vendors, warehouse, whatever you want to call it, that are worse off than they were better. So there's going to be some businesses and industries that, dare I say it, will die off when you make those shifts, right? So as a society, that's what I mean by responsible innovation, that you shouldn't just cut them off, right? As a leader or as an ecosystem, you should think about how to either retrain or engage with those experienced communities, businesses, whatever it is, in a different way. And traditionally, when you think about digital transformation, I don't think we've done a good job of that, right? And then thinking about remote work, yes, that's one part of it, but we also talked about being more human, and that to me is part of being more human. How do you create value for society, not just for your own business, because it's convenient for me to just focus on this part of the revenue and my own products and not think about expanding that piece of pie and collaboration across those boundaries, right?
I agree with you. And so a very important component of innovation is that
Mhm.
it's an invention which is meant to create value. And this value has to be omnipresent. It cannot be only for me because I am the leader or I am the business house.
Exactly.
So that's why
Yeah.
it is the culture which has to change and the mindset which has to change, where you have
Yeah.
to, again, we can actually link it up with circle economy or sustainability, because finally that is also our responsibility. So whatever may happen in the tech, we may go to Mars tomorrow, but if we don't think holistically, it may may cause
Yeah.
us grief, and
Oh,
it's happening. I
it'll
mean,
be.
it's happening.
I've been joking actually that that's a Snowpiercer, the movie, not the show. I hate the show. But if you haven't watched that movie, I highly recommend it. And it shows the class system that seeps in, not because of a religion or because of the structures, but automatically in a society that has a digital divide, which fails to educate some people over others, where creates a lot of these shifts that are happening now. So as we innovate, especially with disruptive tech like AI, IoT, AR, VR, whatever you want to call it, certainly requires a lot more special attention to policy, right? How many policy conversations have you heard in the last year and a half that we haven't heard before? Sorry, Sushant, I don't want to
Sure. No, no,
hijack.
no, that's good. So I think it's been a great discussion. I'll just scroll through the chats, and looks like that there are a lot of questions. Uh, so the first one is, now this is to the group, is no, this is for Gunjan. So with flexible timing, we managed to land bigger share of employee mind share. Is that healthy?
Yeah, I'm not sure what they mean by employee mindshare. I think what they're meaning, and I'll make an assumption here
Hmm.
and answer it. I think what they're trying to say is with the shift from 9 to 5 to collaboration tools, you're no longer tied to a desk, and that work life balance